There's no such thing as a million-dollar idea. You all think you have them. There's no such thing as a million-dollar idea. You have to do something. I could put a man on the moon with a solid fuel rocket. How much will you pay me? Nothing, he says. That's exactly right. You've all walked into a store and you saw a product that you thought of 2 years ago. Anybody? Yeah, but you didn't know what to do next. And that's part of the development of a product. Knowing what the next steps are, and that's what you do very, very well in New Zealand, is come up with lots and lots of ideas. The next step is the key. And so what we tried to do is to formalize, to some extent, how over the years we were able to create so many products and get them commercially acceptable. The system we use, if I do this correctly, is simple. A, B, C. Research, create, implement. And that's what we're trying to do in general. That's why it's so simple. You have to research the product. And you heard in the beginning talks that we had that the first step in the new product development process was to do the research. You have to understand what the market is and what are the needs of the market. And if you don't know the total market, you don't understand where the market is, and you don't know what the customer wants, how in God's name are you going to create a product? I will almost guarantee, in fact I will guarantee, that everyone in this audience right now in 1 hour could create a product and put it on the market and make money. Instead of sitting at home wondering, gee, what should I invent today? Take 3 complaints about existing products. All of you have a complaint about something you've bought or sold or have gotten or seen in a store. Take that complaint, that simple complaint, you can turn that into a product. Because what have you done? That's really a market need. Someplace in the marketplace, there's a product out there already that has a need that it's not being filled. And the reason I say that is that in the classes that I've been doing for the last 6 or 7 years, we start off with a complaint of a customer. The customer happens to be students, and they form teams. But in general, it gets a little more complicated than just ABC. I like to start with a team. And the reason, if you look at this, there's a symmetry that occurs here. All of them start with multiple teams or multifunctional teams. By having a team, you may be the world's greatest inventor. And I talk to various inventors groups, and in general what happens is the inventor has been working in his garage for 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years, maybe 14 years for all I know, and then he gets a patent, spends $10,000, $12,000, and the stupid public won't buy his product. That sound familiar? And I say, have you ever asked anyone about it? He says, oh, no, they'd steal it. Steal what? You're not selling it. He has never gotten in touch with the customer to find out what does the customer want. And so if you live in a vacuum in this researching, you will always stay in a vacuum. So besides having this complaint, you want to take a look to get customer needs. And how do you do that? That's relatively straightforward. You can do a survey, you can do various ways. Okay? If you want to take a look at whether or not you are an entrepreneur, we'll cover this again. There are things that entrepreneurs have in common. If you are becoming an inventor only for the money, you're probably not going to succeed. You really are not. If you're doing it because you're looking for security, as we were saying over a cup of coffee, go hit a cop in the head with a baseball bat. You will then be 20 to 30 years. You won't have to worry about food, clothing, or shelter because you're going to be in a prison if you want maximum security. Okay? We don't want to do either one of those 2 things. You have to love what you're doing. And if you don't love what you're doing, you're not going to be successful. You have to absolutely love it, which means you're going to dedicate 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You will live and breathe your product. That dedication is one of the keys. If you don't do that, you may still succeed, but it's going to be more difficult. Okay? Don't do it for the money. You have to have some tolerance of risk. You have to be persistent. One of the inventors from New Zealand here sent me an email when I was back in the States. I've worked with various inventors. He sent me an email and he said, I went to the warehouse and they said they didn't want my product. And really, I mean, even the email went downhill, showing total depression. Okay? And my reply was, congratulations. I've got hundreds of those rejections. If you let one of those knock you out, then you're not really an entrepreneur. Most of you have seen a cat walking along a lawn and stalking a bird for a half hour, tail every once in a while giving a little twitch. Just before he's going to pounce on the bird flies away. And what does the cat do? He says, oh, shakes himself off, and he stays a cat. He doesn't give up and say, I'm not a cat anymore. He stays and persistent, and he says, okay, I didn't get that bird. He may only get 1 out of 50, who knows? But he still keeps doing it. All of you, not all of you, some of you cut grass. Students do not cut grass, it's not in their job description. You cut your grass. This week it grows, cut your grass. Suppose one day you go out there and the grass says, no sense me growing, you're going to cut me down next week. Yeah? Persistence. Grass will continue growing, cats will remain cats. That's important. As an entrepreneur, you can't be discouraged. Believe in what you're doing. That doesn't mean positive attitude totally, but you have to be optimistic. Okay, there's another market. I may have missed that. Okay? And one of the other things that you may want to do is, for instance, attracting outstanding people. That's why I like to work with teams. You may know all there is to know about the electronics, but you don't know anything about marketing. Go find somebody to work with that knows marketing, someone who knows how to do a survey. You don't have a clue as to how the financials should work. Go find somebody who understands financials. When you form a team like that, the product that you will create is going to be viable because you've looked at all the bases. In general, not always, in general, most of the consumer products that you will find that you've been buying are market pull. And by that I mean, there's a need in the marketplace, you create a product that fills that need. That's why complaints work out so well. You can create a product because there's a complaint, there's a need, you can fill that need. Most, I would say most, 80, 90% are in that area. Technology push, for instance, is one where I invent the molecule, then I go find out what am I going to do with it. Or a plastic. I have a plastic that doesn't melt until 500 degrees. I don't know what to do with it. I didn't create it. It came by accident. Now I have to go out. What are the marketplaces that I can sell a plastic that melts at 500 degrees? Well, first thing would be maybe fire alarm systems. You can, instead of a metal box, use a plastic box. You follow us? You have to go find the market to sell that. And Tyvek did that. That's the material that you see covering houses as vapor barriers. I used them, 15 years ago, before they knew what their market was, in sealing surgical instruments for sterilization. It's a vapor barrier. Ethylene oxide is 85% humidity. I didn't want the humidity go through, only the ethylene oxide gas. And so in doing something like that, I used Tyvek. There's more Tyvek on a house or a group of houses than I would ever dream of using in surgical instruments. They found the market, but they had to keep scrambling. Very, very expensive way of doing it and very difficult. A lot of products that you see are platform products. You have a product in a marketplace called Hewlett-Packard printers. Do you think they change the cartridge every time they come up with a new printer? Do you think they have that little head that goes back and forth? They changed it? No, they changed the program. If you were to take the name off your computer, you wouldn't know how many megahertz or gigahertz or whatever the hell they're doing now, what's in that machine. Because the designers went and they go from a 396, they go to an 896, and they go to a 1296. They just change one simple chip. That's why you can't tell the difference. So in many cases, you can create a product by product line extension or platforms. Done a lot in the toy business, and to some extent, I have to say, in surgical instruments, once you have an initial market identified. A complaint. My toaster doesn't take bagels All of you know what bagels are. I've seen them advertised on TV. But if you don't know, it's a round piece of dough that looks like a donut, except it's dough. They tend to be pretty wide when you cut them in half. My toaster doesn't take bagels. Everyone here would have a very quick first solution. Make the slots wider. Anybody disagree? No. Cut the bagel thinner. Sure, you're going to tell every customer what you want. But a more obvious solution would be make the slots. But the next question is, when you go out and do a survey, which I always insist you do, and you do 100, 150, or 200 people, guess what the #1 complaint is if you ask open questions? What is the biggest problem with your toaster? It takes too much counter space. That's what the answer is. So you may be working away getting wider slots when the real problem is too much counter space. So why can't you take the toaster, flip it up on its side, and slide it under a cabinet with a piece of asbestos so you don't burn the house down? Does the toaster have to be chrome? Or can we match it to the decor of the kitchen? You may be able, once you do the survey, understand the needs of the customer, not just what they articulate, you may be able to create a premium product. Instead of $19.95, get $24.95. Okay? So it's important that you really do a survey, understand what the need really is. That's what I mean by getting the raw data. You can start, and you can do it several ways. I prefer, if I possibly can, is to do a face-to-face survey. There's a lot of other ways of doing it, but in general, if you can get at the first stages, don't be afraid of people stealing your stuff, my goodness. Nobody does that. You all saw these products in a store, and you were afraid somebody's going to steal it. They didn't steal it from you. They came up with it independently because they saw a need for it. So don't be afraid. Don't come out of fear that people can't see what you're working on or be in trouble. Okay? That is not the way to do it. There are other ways of getting this data. You could indeed go to trade shows and various other places. Once you have this data, and without getting more detail than that, you probably take this data and you'll look at what you would call specifications. If you find out from all your customers and say, how much would a device that did such and such, what's the most it should weigh? And they say 6 ounces. And your product coming out of your garage weighs 2.5 pounds. Have you succeeded? You haven't met the customer's needs. And that's the point of having some kind of specifications, not just working away in a little vacuum, but trying to find out what does the customer want and how to put metrics on it. It has to assemble quickly. A metric for quickly is time. Must assemble in 15 minutes. No tools required, or you provide them with them if they need a special tool. What does the customer want? And they keep going back, because once you have specifications and you understand what the customer needs, there's a couple of other things you need to do, but a really important thing is once you have specifications, you cannot come up with only one idea or one concept of how to meet those needs. My experience has been that you cannot do that. You must have 3, 4, 5, 6 different concepts of how you're going to meet that need. And then with some kind of a chart, we're not going to go into all the details, but basically you're going to rank them in some way based on how well they meet the needs of the customer. One of those being cost. When you ask open questions in a survey, how much would you pay? Nothing wrong with that. You'll find a range from $5 to $8,000, but you may find a central thing that says $20, under $20. That gives you a clue, and I'll talk why that's important, okay? Because it establishes for you what is the maximum cost you have to build this thing. If it costs you $800 to build it and it can only sell for $20, anybody think you got a product? You don't. You have to pay attention to what the customer wants and get those specifications. And when you have 4 or 5 different products and you find that one of them is outstanding, that's the one that meets the specs the best, before you select that and start buzzing away, building something, See if you can combine the best of all the others into that last concept. You may have 5 concepts that you may be able to combine 5 and 2 and come up with 6. That's even better. And then use your intuition, for goodness sakes. Don't just say, oh yeah, that's it, we'll do that. Use your intuition. If it looks screwy to you and it makes absolutely no sense what you're coming up with, for God's sake, don't do it. Because there's something wrong, something is flawed in your selection process. If you look at creating these products, if you take an artist and you say, many of you have painted something or sketched something, but your method was not to go and put as much paint on that paper or that canvas, as much paint as possible in the shortest period of time. Had nothing to do with that. The creative process is manifesting into the physical what was in here. That idea is not worth anything until you take it and manifest it into the physical, either as a prototype, a model, a sketch, a drawing. There's a lot of advantages to being able to do that, but you have to have the attitude of an artist when you're creating. And any of you that have painted something, how many people have ever sketched or painted? Yeah, about half of you. Did the painting ever finish the way you thought it would when you started? Anybody? It never does. The painting takes on a life of its own, and those people that have done it understand what I'm saying. You start off painting one thing, and the painting, all of a sudden, the creative process takes over. That's why it's important to get it into the physical, either as a sketch, a model, a piece of clay, cardboard, scissors, whatever. But getting that first concept model is going to open up a whole bunch of things. And in fact, I always say don't lock in on the first solution, because as you build and try to create something, you'll find other alternate ways of doing it. And there's a whole series of things that you can do in that, in creating something new. If you get to this point, you build a prototype. One of the most important things that you could possibly do is now you have manifested into the physical a prototype or a model of what your concept is to solve or to be able to address a need of a customer. The 4 basic needs: communication. I could tell you I have this idea of helping you read better by taking these 2 circles of glass, attach it with a piece of wire, and then another piece of wire that comes up this way and another one comes, or I can say, this is the concept for helping you to read better. I don't like gray, they're too small, what's that piece of wire hanging off the back? You have things to say. It's a communication device. And if you're in a team, finally your ideas and somebody else, you can't read somebody else's mind or look into their head. And so what you can do when you have a prototype, a physical prototype, everyone now can participate in the creative process. Oh, well, gee, these are pretty heavy. Can we make them out of plastic? We don't want metal. Things can happen. You go to a vendor and say, I would like to have a tool built. Now, I'm an old tool and die maker, and I can tell you right now, you'll get a much cleaner, better quote if you say, this is what I want, as opposed to giving me full drawings. Why? I have to sit down. You may or may not buy the tool, so how much time am I going to spend? I'll have to interpret the drawings, take the 2-dimensional drawings, create them into 3 dimensions, be able to look at what the tooling, I'll do a whole bunch of stuff. You show me this, and I can tell you what the mold will cost. All right, Matthew? You show a model to a model maker or a tool maker, you'll get, number 1, a faster quote and a more accurate quote. They won't blow you off. They've got something to look at, and they don't have to spend 2 hours interpreting drawings. Because suppose they interpret them incorrectly. They're going to give you a bad quote. Model always is an excellent communication device. It's a critical milestone. When you have, finally, a prototype, something that reflects what you want to do, it's a real milestone. You didn't exist 3 months ago. You now have a product that you want to go forward with, or you think you do. Okay? You can also make sure it works. Most people that build prototypes, and some of my students are here, the first time they build a prototype, they made it from drawings or sketches that they thought were right. It's either too big or too small, doesn't look very good. There's things wrong with it. And so there are things that will change as you build the prototype, but also tells you whether or not it's going to work, which is nice to know. No sense going forward if it doesn't work. The other thing is, you'll see as we get a little bit further, that a lot of things are modules. I can make these side pieces in Singapore, and I can make the frames here in New Zealand. I can insert the glass in New Zealand. Wouldn't it be nice to know that these side pieces actually fit the frame? So if you have components that are separated, that's why one of the other things that you can do with the prototype. Make sure that the individual modules work together as a unit. And that happens from time to time on more complex things. One of the things also you have to be aware of is that you're always working with some kind of a system. And the reason I say that is if you are designing a telephone, it has to plug in. You can't make a telephone that plugs into your own design outlet because nobody else has them. Okay, waste of time. Understand the system that you're working in. I can't build a mouse if the wire that goes to the PC doesn't work. So most products are in some kind of a system, including a hammer. What's the system? What is the size of a hand? If you make the handle of a hammer 3 inches in diameter, nobody can grab it. The system is the human body. So be aware of what system that you're in. And in some cases, by product architecture, how can you best utilize your team? Some of you may be aware of laparoscopic surgery that allows a gallbladder to be removed through a small stainless steel tube. And instead of, usually women have gallbladder operations, instead of 6 to 8 weeks where you can't drive a car, you can be lifting weights the following week. Okay? Some of you may have even had this operation. This stainless steel tube goes in your body. I was very fortunate in working with these devices because I retired 10 years ago at 60. The stock went from 5 to 140. Not a bad deal. We changed surgery around the world. So we have instruments. These are surgical. They have never been in human beings. I know somebody always worries about that. This is one of the devices that was around before. This goes into an open operation. You take this, and if you put a bowel, which is nothing more than a noodle or a sausage casing, depending on the animal you're working on, you clamp it in between here. You push this little button from an open. It will then cut and put staples into this bowel so it doesn't leak inside your body. If you do it twice, you take out the cancerous bowel and get rid of it and rejoin the bowel for a human being. Mr. Hirsch, Leon Hirsch, chairman of the board of U.S. Surgical, we had already started some instruments. He said, Henry, what I'd like you to do is put this in here. I said, Leon, you might as well shoot me now. It won't fit. This doesn't go in. I tried it a couple of times. Look, doesn't work. What did Leon want? He wanted the functions of an endoscopic or a GIA, which means gastrointestinal anastomosing machine or device. He wanted that function to go down a tube. That's what he wanted. This instrument does everything that one does, not only that, it does it better. So if you can picture an appendix in here, pull the trigger. Inside the body, no more big bikini scars. Or if you're a man, you don't care, maybe feel as macho to have a scar, I don't know. This device is an example of how, and incidentally, I also worked for J&J at one point in my career. They have never been able to duplicate this instrument. Breaking this into its component parts, the front end, this tooling part at the front, that's the business end. That's where things happen. Creating this anvil, staple holder, and the strength to do what you want it to do. A center section which goes into the body, this length, a second module, so to speak, a handle that when you pull it, this will lock out for safety features, but this handle, all these other things are separate individual modular things that you can put a staff of engineers. I worked almost exclusively on this end in creating this. And we actually created a whole new business called metal injection molding. To be able to come up with this anvil at the correct, staple forming anvil at the correct cost and the correct configuration and accuracy. Modular, working business end, laparoscopic end, and the firing end. Not only that, what is the size of a woman's hand? If you look at laparoscopic surgery, more women, surgeons, doing laparoscopic surgery today than ever before because their hands are smaller, they're not as strong. This is the grip any woman can use, and it's no more than 25 pounds to give you 300 at this end. Pretty good. The team that worked at this end in multiplying the force. It met the needs of the customer. They've been selling now for the last 15 years, 14 years, 600,000 a year at $300 a piece. Not a bad deal. Okay? They made money on it. There are other modifications and new products that come out. What you might call this product line extension, that's the platform. But the essence is the front end. So when you're building a product, or coming up finally with how you're going to make it, you have to make a decision. Is it going to be modular or is it going to be integrated? Are you going to give me all the pieces, like a motorcycle engine with a transmission combined, and only after all the pieces are together, completely assemble one engine transmission for a motorcycle? Or are you going to do it like Swatch does with their watches? Every case is the same. Every battery in every Swatch watch is exactly the same. That allows a group of engineers to go to Thailand and say, we want batteries that will last 2 years and we want to pay the lowest possible price. You can actually have people working on it. The circuits are all the same. The only thing that changes on it is the color of the band, the color of the case, and maybe the color of the face and the color of the hand. These are all little components. They can be made in Mexico, Thailand, wherever. Again, they all have to be brought together and assembled. That's where the problem is. Material control. If you have one component missing in a modular design, that's a big problem because you can't make anything. Banks are modular. May not be apparent. Do you have to get everything that the bank offers you when you go in? If you only want a checking account, you only get a checking account. If you want a checking and a savings, they'll sell you the savings module. If you want to get a home loan, they'll do that. Banks, insurance companies, a lot of people have followed that concept where they have specialists that do nothing but home loans. So the modular system, as opposed to integrated, is in our system. In general, I happen to like modular because it has a lot of pluses. The disadvantage is material control. Being able to get these parts together in sufficient quantities from all over the world at the correct time for you to be able to assemble it. Okay. I was going to talk a little bit about Hot Wheel cars. We were talking a little bit about it just a moment ago. I ran the factory that made Hot Wheel cars. That was from Mattel way back when? Back in the late 60s. Some pretty old, actually. Any of you ever have Hot Wheel cars when you were kids? Yeah. Did you have one? Anybody here only had one? You only had one. You prefer Matchbox. Now, that's interesting. What Mattel did was we wiped out Matchbox. We wiped them out. One of your professors here, I was having dinner with him and another professor, and says, I hate you. I said, what'd I do? He said, you destroyed Lesney, Matchbox. And the reason was, we went modular. I took that up to 1,600,000 a week. That's a lot of cars, okay? But we did it on a modular basis, but we also had, in what we were trying to do, it was collectible, which means we had to make as many of these of all kinds of varieties and colors and be able to change over from one model to another as quickly as that. And that's what we did. Lesney built a huge machine. Jim Chips and Vic Rado built it. I later hired them at Mattel. Good engineers, but they only did what they were told. This machine would turn out 250,000 of these cars every week. Really good. But it took 8 days to change it over. Great big integrated machine. All the components going into hoppers. One hopper missing, they would shut down production. They were not able to make enough cars to make it collectible. And in spite of this cheapskate only had 2 cars, most people bought 5, 6. Anybody have over 10? No. But 10 is a lot. You bought them. They're still making them. Now, they don't look anything like the original ones, but if anybody still has some of the original red lines, look on eBay. My little cord is about $600 for one stupid car that cost $1. So people will buy anything. Go to eBay. You'll make. Now, I gave them to my youngest son mainly because of the thousands that I had over the years. I'm not very smart, and I would have a whole staff around and engineers and everything else, and they say, yep, it started. I don't want to hear that. Put one on my desk. If you said you started the Volkswagen, put it on my desk. I don't want a memo. I don't want a report. I could see it. Yeah, the blue Volkswagen started. That's it. I never had to worry about it. And of course, some of those found their way to my house with 4 kids, and we had them, and I traveled all around the world. We were left now with only a box of 40. I said, well, I had them around for a while, but my son's name was on that box, Michael, my youngest. They belonged to him. I said, I guess they're probably worth 10 bucks a piece, until I went on eBay. I couldn't believe the prices that they're getting for those things. I did give it to him because I'm a man of my word, but it was like, And I should say he's the, well, never mind. He's got a lot more money than I do. One of the things to help you a little bit, and as we go through the new product development process, if you could come up with some way of putting a mission statement, some place to just kind of focus all of your energy into what are you trying to do, it will be very helpful. And if you put it in writing, other people can look at it. Certainly members of your team. Taking that toaster, an electric toaster with wide slots that can be mounted under kitchen cabinets. That's what we're trying to do. Assumptions, that it's electrical. You're not going to have it gas-powered. It's going to have wide slots. You know you have to do that. But notice it says attaches safely. Recognizing the fact it could be a fire hazard. You're going to have to design some way to put an insulating section between that and whatever you're mounted on. Okay? Where are you going to sell it? Primary is going to be in the home. How are you going to position it? Premium. What's a secondary use for it? Offices. A lot of offices make toast, maybe not. We didn't attack with this one. We're not going to attack restaurants. You could, but now it's heavy duty and it's not going to be $24.95. It's going to go on and on for breakfast, 52 weeks a year for 5 years. Totally different toaster, I believe. Okay? Business goals. When are you going to do it? What are your gross margins? Things like that. How many are you going to sell in a year? You have to understand the market to know that you can sell 150,000 for $24.95. Now you can do a financial plan. If you don't understand how much it costs and you don't know what your price is going to be, how are you going to do anything? You can't guess either. Trust me, you can't guess. You can try, but you won't be able to. Very fast way for you to do this. You have a concept for a new product. Look around for competitive products. If there's a competitive product or something looks similar to what you're trying to do, and it costs $20 retail, that's not every product. Perfumes and women's clothes may be different. But in general, most products that you see in a retail store, if it says $20, if you divide that by 4, that is usually the hard cost. And by hard cost, I mean only the labor and material. Forget overhead for what you're doing at the preliminary stages. That's the president's salary. That's for my Ferrari. That's tax losses gone forward. And you got one product. By the time you get through with all of my perks, you won't have any money left to do anything. And you won't be able to properly evaluate. Just use the labor and material. Multiply that by 2. That should give you approximately 50% gross margin. And that should include your overhead. You got one product now. Don't kill yourself on that one. You may not, as an entrepreneur, make a salary. You may have to work out of your house. If you're a larger organization, yes, you do, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do. But if you don't understand the labor and material, which is the bill of materials, the cost of all the components, if you don't understand that, you're going to have problems. Because anybody here ever hear of a cost going down when they're building something? Every product I ever worked on, marketing came over and said, "Can you put this label on?" "Oh, sure." Hey, it's 25 cents for the label. At retail, it's $1. 4 times. Because you take the hard cost, multiply by 2, that's what you sell it to a retailer for. It costs me 5, I sell it for 10, the retailer sells it for 20. That's how it works, except with women's clothes. Women have no problem at all. "Oh, it's only $90, I guess I'll get 2. A man can't even think about buying a shirt over $30. Am I right? Okay, oh, I'll take 4 or 5. So women don't follow that, quite frankly. That's why you can see all those crazy sales, 50% off. If they give you 50% off, they're only making 50% on it. Oh, what a shame. Okay? So there's a lot of things you can do. But if you take that away with you, that's an important thing to know. When you have this idea, you need to know what its cost is going to be. Create a bill of materials, and when you create the bill of materials, and you do that, and you have a whole bunch of items, let's say this pen, and the most expensive thing, at least on your bill of materials, is this little ball at the very front. That's $1. Everything else is less than 50 cents. Work on the highest dollar value item in your bill of materials. I can't tell you, and Matthew and I were talking about it earlier, a lot of people will work on the dollar item, or on the 50 cent or the 30 cent item. Even if you wipe the whole damn thing out, it means nothing. If you have a $7 item and everything else is under $1, work on the $7 item. It seems obvious, but it is not obvious. Engineers will work on what they like. You may have to work on what's necessary. In fact, that reminds me of Winston Churchill. Sometimes doing all we can is not enough. Sometimes we must do what is necessary. Interesting. We'll probably have, in other sessions, we'll cover more things, but I wanted to mention to you that you can protect your idea at the United States Patent Office for 2 years for $10. Anybody think that's a good deal? You should be demanding I give you that information right now. Well, it can be yours if you get the CD of one of my books. How's that for pitch? I tell you I like money. In the United States, it's first to invent. And so it's very important that you put a stake in the ground of the date of your invention. Now, it could be also the date that you filed a provisional patent, but that's going to be in the European New Zealand system. So I strongly advocate people, if you really have a pretty good idea and you think you built this prototype, that you file a provisional patent in New Zealand and file a disclosure document in the United States. Both those things will give you intellectual property coverage, which is important, because I want to get through where when people have an idea, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, "Oh, I'm going to sell this to some big American company, and I'm going to get 60% royalty." Don't hold your breath. It's not going to happen. I can just give you, from my practical standpoint, this is what you can expect. If all you have is a patent, you may, if you're lucky, get 1%. That means a full patent, issued patent. If you have a patent along with a prototype, that works, not one that doesn't work. I've had guys also say, "Well, it doesn't work, but whoever buys it can fix it." I ain't gonna fix your junk. Take your watch apart and say, "Well, I couldn't get it back together, but my kids have done that to me." Okay, beta. If you sent it out in testing, you made a couple of hundred, sent them out to various places, and you get some interesting feedback from it, it does work. If you have some that you put out on a marketplace, you sold several thousand, people actually gave you money for your idea, and they will be willing to say, God bless this guy, it's the best thing I've ever used, that's going to maybe 5%. If it's enabling technology, for instance, it's something that can be used in wine, it's something that can be used in cars, and something that can be used, I don't know, name anything, in shoes, whatever that technology is. I can't imagine what it would be. But if you have enabling technology that will move into other fields, that's worth a lot more than anything else, because what you can do is you can do a license, you can have everything that has to do with soda bottles. But the next person that you may want to license it to, say anything that has to do with automotive. The next person, anything that has to do with shoes. You can actually license it to 3 non-competing. Would any of you pay me for a license if I didn't guarantee you that I wouldn't sell it to the guy next door to compete with you? Your value goes way down if they even want to buy it in the first place. So there's things to do, but if you take a look at this, that's not a net. 6% of what? All of you have seen movies that have grossed $18 billion, and the investors didn't get any money. What did they say? The accountants with the little adding machine said, we lost money on this deal. That sound familiar? They can fool around with the numbers all they want. So I urge all of you, when you go into a negotiation, you want dollars per unit. You don't want to know, oh, we sold these to Japan and it was a barter deal, so we really didn't. I don't care. Every quarter, tell me how many you shipped. 40,000? You owe me $40,000 if it's $1 a unit. Got it? Be careful in your negotiations. You're not going to get 60%. You may get 1 or 2%, and God bless you if you do. Research, create, all these other things are implement. We, of course, did not cover them all. That you've had patent coverage, you have financial planning, you have marketing, market planning, how you're going to advertise, and so forth. And so there are a lot of other areas. When we're talking about the product itself, you have to do the research before you create, and when you create, go back and check it. Make sure that you're still meeting the needs of a customer. Resources for you. The Spark website is excellent. The book that I'm talking about is used both at Yale and here, and it's sold on Amazon.com. In the US, it's $29.95 plus shipping if you get it off Amazon. And I thought $60 would be too high. So what I've done is I've made it available as a CD. And most of you know Volume 1. They're on Simon Street. That's where, if you feel that you want to get one, please do. And